Thank you for listening and supporting the Daily Memphian. Sign up for one of our many free newsletters and breaking news alerts at dailymemphian.com/email to receive the latest local news stories impacting our community. Our weekly newsletters cover everything from sports to arts and culture, business, food, and more, along with daily updates of all the news we publish each day. Sign up or manage your email preferences at dailymemphian.com/email.
What's up, y'all? You're listening to the latest episode of the Tigers Podcast. I'm Frank Bonner, joined by co-host Steven Johnson as always. And the Tigers are still in conversation of the tournament bracket bubble on the basketball side of things, so we'll get into all of that. But before we jump into it, I got to make sure y'all check out some of our other podcasts, starting with Jennifer Biggs, who hosts Soundbites, Eric Barnes hosts The Sidebar, and Chris Harrington and Drew Hill have got you covered with the Grizzlies podcast every week. You can find all of these anywhere you get your podcasts, including Apple Music, Spotify, and dailymemphian.com. So, Steven, just how big was that win for Memphis and keeping their tournament hopes alive against a Temple team that, isn't anywhere near like a quad one?
Well, I think it was funny kind of going into the game. Memphis had moved from being one of the top teams in the last four in to I think the first team in the first four out per Joe Lunardi of ESPN. So he said basically last night was a must-win game for Memphis to get back inside the field, and obviously they did that. And you could kind of tell like people were anxious early because Memphis started off slow. They fell behind by 8. And I had a weird feeling about the game as well because Temple – I figured Memphis would win, but Temple has just kind of been gritty all year. They've been toughing games out, just kind of hanging around in there, and they were just kind of out hustling Memphis at first. But Memphis got it together. They rolled and they covered as well too for my FanDuel people. So overall, I don't think the Tigers played their best, but at this point, it's just about getting wins, and they did that last night. So they're probably back in the field, at least on ESPN, and in real good shape if they can win these last 3 games to not have to really sweat what happens in the conference tournament.
And looking at how they won that game, specifically looking at Jalen Duren, when you see him play a game like this where Memphis, didn't have its best outing, but you needed to win, Jalen Duren comes through in the clutch. What does that do in terms of how well you think he can play in crunch time, the end of the year against Houston, Wichita State, and in the tournament, just knowing that you have a freshman who can give you big buckets like that in a crunch time situation?
Well, for me, I always said that Memphis has a good problem in terms of there are a bunch of guys on that roster, maybe 5 or 6 that can really lead you in scoring on any given night. But as the postseason approaches, man, it is go time. I think it's imperative, honestly, that teams find out who their best players or who their top options are, because those great teams, like Gonzaga, Duke, et cetera, like that, and we know Memphis isn't at that level, but those teams know who they want to play through. They know who their top dog is. So I think the emergence of Jalen Duren, who just tied a career high with 22 points, tied a career high in shot attempts, and set a career high with minutes with 34. The fact that he's producing the way he's been producing, I think bodes well for the Tigers because now they know who they want to play through. And if he's drawing double teams, and that's just going to create more spacing for your Lester Quinones, your Landers, your Tyler Harrises, and things of that nature. So I think it's big that Jalen has kind of really asserted himself as the best player on the team. He is probably the most talented. There's a reason he's all over these NBA lottery projections for the draft coming up in the next couple months. So he's been looking like a lottery pick, and I think Memphis, especially on the offensive end, where I think they scored almost 78 or more points, including 80 points, and I think 5 of their last 7 games or something like that. And Jalen's kind of domination has kind of been a big reason for that.
Yeah, and I think the shot attempts are huge because, earlier in the year, I thought that Memphis needed to get Jalen some more shot attempts. Me personally, I don't think that you should have a game where Jalen Duren doesn't get at least 10 shot attempts a game if you want to go deep into the tournament. So to see him get up to 12, I think is big for him individually, but just big for this team offensively in terms of where they're going with the ball. I guess where I know in the flow of a game, you can't really necessarily hone in on this player needs this many shot attempts, but where are you on terms of how many shot attempts you think Jalen Duren should be getting per game as we get closer into the tournament?
Well, for me, honestly, I agree with you. I don't think there's any reason why he doesn't get 10 shot attempts a game. Like, if the defense is just double teaming him so much where he like has to pass up shots, then that's one thing, and that means somebody else is going to get off. But he has to be at the very least against the AAC, because there's no one defender in this league that can guard him. Houston doesn't have a guy. SMU doesn't have a guy. Wichita State won't have a guy on Sunday. So especially against these teams, man, they have to feed him, because any big man is going to depend on people getting the ball. So I think they have to feed him. He has to continue to be aggressive. I do think he needs to be focused on getting at least 10 shot attempts a game. And I think he's making like 65% of his attempts over these last 5 or 6 games. So when he gets it, man, he's been effective. So I agree with you. I think he needs to be approaching or touching double-digit shot attempts. And if he's not, the only reason that should be happening is because teams are just double-teaming him. And he's shown that more oftentimes than not, he can make the right play, and he's a very willing passer. So I think as long as they play through him, and to a lesser extent DeAndre Williams, I think that should bode well for them going down the stretch.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next point. You can't talk about how Memphis has played, towards the later half of the season without mentioning Williams and Nolly. And just how big they've been in getting this push going. What did you think from Williams against Temple, the points and the production he was able to put up?
Well, it was funny because he started slow. I think he missed his first 2 shots. He had 3 turnovers. At one point in the game, he yelled out, "Man, this is an ugly, game." You know what I mean? So because he was that frustrated, I think, like I said, there was just a weird start, a weird energy. I think Memphis might have just been a little bit anxious because they knew how big the moment was. But to see him kind of settle down, and honestly, it was funny because once he was frustrated, he came to the sideline. Jalen Duren was there waiting for him and kind of picked him up, kind of consoled him, kind of helped him get his head back in the game, and he finished with 19 points as well, one of his best games. So when he's on, obviously he's like an emotional leader of the team. We know his fiery personality, what he brings on both ends. But when he's in control and playing like he did last night, I think Memphis arguably has maybe one of the best 1-2 punches with Duren and Williams in the front court in the nation. Forget the AAC. And I think that's how highly I think of his skill set. And he kind of showed that down the stretch.
So are you concerned at all, just because you talked about how weird the nature was in this Temple game and the vibe and everything, are you concerned that any of that is going to carry over into this Wichita State game?
I don't think so. I think Memphis is going to be a little more geared up for Wichita State, because the Shockers are going to be geared up for Memphis, as the Tigers kind of had their number. But I think the Tigers are aware of what can happen, what's at stake. They know full well that they can't afford to take any more losses. So I'm expecting, I think there'll be a little more energy on Sunday. It's a weekend game. It's a little bit more of a bigger name than as opposed to Temple. So I think they'll get out to a better start. And it's funny because that Wichita State game was really the game that kind of helped them turn around things, because they had such a dominant performance, I think, around New Year's or something like that. So I think they'll have a little more energy. I think they'll come out to play a little bit better. So I don't think it'll linger. I think whatever the coaches said about locking on to the game plan, that was kind of the focus. So I think they'll come out and pay a little bit more attention to detail, and I think they'll get out to a better start against the Shockers.
So looking at the rest of the season, you got Wichita State, South Florida, and Houston. Do they absolutely need to win out these last 3 games, in your opinion, to still be on the inside of that bubble?
I don't think they need to win out to be on the inside of the bubble. I think if they win these last 3, you beat Houston again, I have to feel like that'll move you up from like last 4 in to maybe, one of those last automatic buys, so you don't have to play in the play-in game. So they want one of those without having to worry about necessarily what they got to do in Fort Worth when they go to the conference tournament. I say win all 3. But it's imperative. You can't lose on Sunday, and you most certainly cannot lose next Thursday against South Florida, probably the worst team in the AAC. So they win these next 2 games, and I think they'll just probably have to go into Fort Worth and maybe just need to win a game. So I think they're close, man. They're close, take it one game at a time. But if they can take care of business on Sunday and Thursday, then I think they'll go into Texas in the conference tournament in pretty good position in the conference. I mean, going towards the big dance.
Now, the interesting conversation that some of the broadcasters were having, when I was watching the game, was the fact that when you get into the the conference tournament games, the bubble can shrink in terms of, they use Murray State as an example. If Murray State doesn't win their conference tournament, Murray State's going to be in whether they win or not. Well, now you have another automatic qualifier that takes up a spot from somebody on a bubble, and, it can kind of get dicey. If things like that start to happen in the conference tournament, are you concerned for Memphis?
It'll really depend on. That's a situation where if you beat Houston again in the regular season finale, I think that would be huge to your chances of not really having to worry about that. Look, we know there are going to be bid stealers all over, especially in these mid majors. It wouldn't surprise me if somebody from the OVC came and won that league and Murray State is automatically in. So I think it's definitely a concern, and it's just kind of a consequence of not handling your business in some of those earlier games that you kind of have to worry about it. But I still feel like 68 teams have to get in. I really feel, and we know there's going to be a couple Cinderellas, but I really feel like if Memphis can. If they can beat Houston, I don't think they have much to worry about, honestly. But if you don't beat Houston, then it's a situation where maybe you might want to get to at least the title game. They're probably going to have to go through SMU. We'll figure out in these next coming days how the seeding is going to shake out. And obviously the Mustangs have kind of had the Tigers' numbers. So other than that, if it was for SMU, I would feel confident that they would win the conference tournament, to be honest with you. But I think they're in a position, man, where that Houston game is going to be major, and it's going to tell us how much do they have to sweat. They win it, I think they're going to be pretty much in as long as they don't lay an egg. They lose it, I think they'll be in the right side, but there's still going to be a little work to be done, and depending on what happens across the country, it could make Selection Sunday a little more stressful if they don't handle their business against the Cougars at home.
And I think, to your point about their ability to still win the conference tournament, I think as disappointing as the beginning of this season was for Memphis, if they still find a way to win the conference tournament and hold that title, I think that will kind of take some of that disappointment back to say that, we were still, the best team in the league, even if we didn't necessarily do it in the regular season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Penny will be able to take some satisfaction knowing that when they were pretty much healthy, the only team that really beat them in the league was SMU, which is SMU might end up being a tournament team. They're no slouch. So at their healthiest, I do believe there's a chance it's going to come down to the SMU matchup, because most likely, unless something happens, unless they get upset, as of today, you're going to have to probably face them in that semifinal round. So aside from SMU, I do think Memphis is kind of I do think Memphis has made a case that they were the best team. At full health, just about every one of their losses, with the exception of that second SMU loss, they were missing a number of significant players. So I think with the talent they have, they still have ample opportunity to prove they're the best in the conference. And obviously, if you win that conference tournament, you get the automatic bid and you get the first AAC conference tournament, which will be a historic accomplishment for Penny, and I think would go a long way to kind of erasing some of those early season disappointments to kind of put them in the position where the conference tournament is so big right now.
And well, speaking of health, looking at football, Mashburn was supposed to be a big part of that linebacker group going into the season. But he told me a few days ago that he decided to hang up his cleats because of the injury that he's having with his back. And so Memphis losing Cole Mashburn, is a pretty big blow for that linebacker group, who already lost Thomas Pickens and J.J. Russell. So, other than that, not too much going on in football, but I think that is pretty big news for that defense looking to kind of fill some of those voids of the linebacker group.
Well, I guess the biggest question now is, and you always hate to see a player hang it up, because we know how much these college athletes love being able to play. But with him gone and some of the other losses, who were some of the guys that are going to have to step up now? It looks like the Tigers could be pretty young in their linebacking core next year.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you still got Zay Cullins there, and then Jalen Allen. He played some linebacker, but I think you got to look at some of these older guys that Silverfield brought in the recruiting class, right? You've got the Syracuse transfer who has played 30 total games at Syracuse. I think he can come in, being a proven talent at the college level. He's a guy who doesn't necessarily need as much of a transition period as an incoming freshman. from high school. So I think you look to him to kind of fill some of that void. And then you've got, Warren Peoples, the JUCO transfer. And so I think you look at, and Silverfield talked about this in terms of this particular recruiting class and the fact that they had a lot of young guys play last year who were freshmen and stuff because of injuries. In this recruiting class, you're kind of looking at trying to fill some holes. And I think they may have done that with bringing in older linebackers, knowing that you lost some of that group. And, Cole Mashburn told me that he made the decision after he got the news before going into the bowl game. And so it's not like this is new news for the program that they weren't gonna have Cole. It's just new news to us of it being broken. But I think they've already started turning those wheels in their mind about who's gonna replace the certain linebackers that they've lost.
Oh, one player I'm curious about. He had a lot of fanfare. I think he was a 4-star on some recruiting services. Is redshirt freshman Andrew Jones. Says he played in a couple games, mainly special teams. Could he be a guy? I know he's one of the younger guys, but with his talent, has some Power 5 interest. Could he be one of those guys you think could emerge with so many some holes to fill in that group?
Yeah, I think so. Especially with him being a younger guy who's already been at the program, right? It's not like he's an incoming freshman. He's already been here. He knows the culture. He knows the system. Now, obviously, the system is changing with the new defensive coordinator and everything, but he's going to have more, I think, readiness as a younger guy than some of the other younger guys who are first year talents. And so I think this spring ball is going to be really huge for that group in terms of figuring out who's ready and who's not. I think if Andrew Jones has a really good spring ball, we could see him on the field a lot this upcoming season. But I think he's one of those players where this is his opportunity to show. Come towards the end of March when spring ball gets going.
So we know the quarterback battle is going to be the most intense. Is it safe to say the linebacker competition is probably going to be right after that, or is that another position group fans should kind of be looking towards as we approach spring practice?
Oh, I don't know. I would still have to say the running back. I know the linebacker competition is going to be just as important as the running back competition, but I'm a little bit more intrigued by the running back competition just because, bringing in Jay Ducker, knowing what Brandon Thomas was able to do. I mean, Brandon Thomas, before he got hurt, he was the guy. And then obviously he had a couple fumbles or whatever, but you've got those two. You got Asa Martin still there. I am just intrigued on how those running backs are going to be used and who's going to get the nod. I think early on in the season, you may see Ducker and Thomas kind of split the carries or whatever. But I think after that, second or third game, Memphis may find out who's going to be their guy to get the bulk of the carries. And so I'm just, with the fact that they struggled running the ball, as a whole during last season, I'm curious to see who wins that battle and who can kind of carry that torch for that group.
And I guess kind of last, we know we've gotten through one section of kind of transfer season, but we know at the spring practice, after some of these position battles are settled and guys know that they probably didn't get the starting job, but they might not play as much, there's going to be another mass exodus of players. Do you think Memphis will be active in the portal kind of once spring practice wraps up? Yeah,
I think I think they should be just because you've got to always see what's out there. And I think that's kind of the mindset that Silverfield has taken is you're going to see what's out there. And if you see something that you like that could help improve your team, you're going to pull the trigger on trying to get that guy. And so I would think that Memphis would be active in trying to pull some more guys out. And even after the National Signing Day was over with, Silverfield had made the comment because of the new rule that the NCAA has where they allow you up to 7 more scholarships if you got guys transferring and everything. He said he does have some scholarships left that he does plan on using, when he finds a guy that's right for the program. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them kind of pull the trigger after, spring ball.
Well, spring ball is approaching for the Tigers. We got a couple position battles that need to be sorted out. The basketball team is almost at the finish line for the regular season. If they can handle their business, it looks like the Tigers are going to be in great position to go dancing. We'll check back in with you guys next week to update you all on the latest.
In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.